My fiancée mocked my modest proposal ring in front of her friends, so I took it back, canceled the wedding, and let her face public humiliation alone. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I thought I'd finally found the woman I'd marry. Emily was everything I'd ever wanted: charming, effortlessly social, the kind of person who lit up every room she walked into. People admired her, especially her friends. They all seemed to orbit her energy, laughing a little louder, smiling a little brighter whenever she was around. I loved that about her. I loved the way she made ordinary moments feel special, how she could turn a simple coffee run into a memory. And I wanted to give her something equally memorable, something that would show her just how much I cared. I spent months planning the proposal, obsessing over every detail. I wrote a speech, scribbled and rewrote it a dozen times, trying to find the right words to capture everything I felt for her. I chose a small, modest ring. It wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect in my eyes, and it was all I could afford after working extra shifts for weeks. I imagined the look on her face when I got down on one knee, the way her eyes might glisten, the way she might laugh and cry at the same time. I pictured her saying yes, and the world feeling like it had paused just for us every evening. I stayed late at work, pushing through exhaustion, counting down the days until I could finally make this moment happen. I skipped lunches, poured hours into side projects, anything to make sure I could afford the ring and the perfect setting without drowning in debt. It was exhausting, but I told myself it was worth it. This wasn't just about a piece of jewelry. It was about telling her, without words, how much she meant to me. By the night I finally planned to propose, I was nervous, my heart racing with a mix of excitement and anticipation. I thought about her smile, the way she'd wrap her arms around me, and I felt certain she'd love it. I had no idea that in just a few hours, everything I thought mattered would be tested in a way I couldn't have imagined. The day of the proposal felt like it stretched on forever. I woke up with this jittery mix of excitement and nerves, the kind that makes your stomach twist, but in a way that feels electric. I kept checking the ring in my pocket, turning it over in my hand, reminding myself it wasn't just a ring, it was every late night, every extra shift, every skipped meal, all rolled into a single perfect moment for her. Emily didn't know the full plan yet, but I'd convinced her to dress up for a special dinner. I told her it was just us celebrating a quiet night together. In reality, I had secretly invited a few of her closest friends. I wanted them to see her joy firsthand, to share in the happiness I was sure would light up her face. By the time she arrived, my hands were shaking, my heart thumping so loudly I was sure she'd hear it. The restaurant smelled of fresh flowers and warm candlelight, the air soft with the low hum of quiet chatter. I saw her across the room, laughing at something her friend said, and for a second, everything felt like it had slowed. She looked stunning, radiant in that simple dress, hair falling perfectly around her shoulders. I felt this swell of love that made my chest ache. This was it, the culmination of months of careful planning. When she finally noticed me, her smile made the nervous energy in my body explode into something almost unbearable. I led her to our little private corner, the spot I'd chosen for its intimacy. Soft lighting and quiet view of the city beyond the windows. I could feel the weight of the ring in my pocket, heavy with significance, and I rehearsed my lines silently, over and over. I wanted it to be perfect, every word heartfelt, every gesture intentional. But as I glanced toward her friends, I caught a glimpse of something I couldn't place, a smirk, a whisper, a glance shared between them. I shook it off immediately, telling myself I was overthinking. This was our moment. Nothing else mattered. Or so I thought, because the moment I had imagined for months was about to unravel in a way I never saw coming. I got down on one knee, my hands trembling slightly as I pulled the small box from my pocket. Emily's eyes widened, and for a split second, everything felt perfect. The soft glow of the candles, the low hum of the restaurant, the warmth radiating between us. I opened the box, letting the modest ring catch the light. And I said the words I had practiced 100 times. Emily, I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. Will you marry me? Her smile froze for a moment, just long enough to make my heart leap, hoping I'd just caught her off guard in the right way. But then she laughed. A short, sharp, unmistakable laugh. Not the kind of laugh that's delighted, but the kind that cuts. And then she looked at her friends. "Oh my God," she said, voice dripping with amusement. "This is cute. Really, it's cute." I froze, my stomach twisting. "Cute?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. "You mean, you don't like it?" Her friends giggled, one covering her mouth like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Emily held up the ring between her fingers, turning it over as if examining a trinket from a bargain bin. "It's sweet for what it is," she said, smiling mockingly. "I just didn't expect this. I thought, maybe something a little bigger." My chest tightened. Every ounce of pride I had built up over months of saving, planning, and imagining this perfect moment felt like it had been punched out of me. I looked around the table. The restaurant felt smaller, hotter, the chatter and clinking of cutlery fading into a distant hum. I could hear my own breathing, shallow, fast. I wanted to laugh it off, tell myself it was a joke, maybe she didn't mean it. But the way her friends were all smiling, whispering to each other, the way she was holding that ring as if it were a cheap toy, it wasn't a joke. It was deliberate. And in that instant, I realized that this woman, the one I trusted with my heart, was humiliating me. Publicly, in front of the people I hoped would celebrate our love, I forced a smile, nodding as if I were amused, but inside my mind was spinning. I had no idea then just how far this betrayal would go. I walked out of the restaurant feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Emily's laughter and the whispers of her friends replayed in my head over and over, a loop I couldn't escape. Every step I took felt heavier than the last, like I was trudging through quicksand, made of embarrassment and disbelief. I had planned this moment to be the happiest night of my life, the start of our forever, and instead, it had turned into something I didn't even recognize: public mockery. With me as the punchline, I couldn't even meet her eyes. "Emily, what the hell was that?" I finally managed, my voice tight, strained, like I was trying to force air through a narrow tube. She looked at me, tilting her head, the same mocking smile still in place. "What do you mean?" "I'm just being honest," she said, casual, like she was explaining the weather. "It's not like I said anything mean. Honest." That word hit me like a slap. Honest. She thought she was being truthful. But what I felt was betrayal so sharp I wanted to scream. "In front of everyone?" I whispered, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "You humiliated me in front of your friends." She shrugged lightly, as if my feelings were inconsequential. "They know me. They get it. You're being sensitive." Sensitive. That word stung worse than any insult she could have thrown at the ring itself. My stomach churned, my head buzzing with rage, shame, and disbelief. The air felt heavier now, the soft hum of the restaurant replaced by the pounding of my own heart. My friends, who I thought would quietly support me, seemed unsure where to look, and I could almost hear their judgments unspoken. I left the restaurant in a haze, my mind replaying every detail, trying to process what had just happened. The night air hit me like a shock, but even that couldn't cool the fire growing inside me. I realized, with a sinking certainty, that this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a glimpse of who she really was, and I had no idea how deep her mockery and the web of humiliation she was weaving would go. The days after the proposal were strange. Emily acted like nothing had happened, like the restaurant scene had been some fleeting joke that I just didn't understand. But every time I tried to laugh it off or bring it up gently, she waved me off with a casual, "You're taking this way too seriously." Her friends, who had been giggling during the proposal, now seemed perfectly comfortable letting the tension linger without a word of support from me. The whole thing sat in my chest like a stone I couldn't dislodge. I started noticing little things I'd missed before. The way she'd comment on other people's expensive gifts or vacations, turning casual observations into subtle jabs. The way she'd glance at me when someone mentioned my modest income, that half smile that said she knew I wasn't measuring up in her eyes. I remembered past jokes that stung more than I had admitted to myself, whispered comment about my apartment being too small, a laugh about my old car. I'd brushed them off at the time, thinking I was overreacting or that she just had a teasing sense of humor. But now looking back, They weren't jokes at all. Then came the whispers from her friends. One of them pulled me aside a few nights later, hesitating, almost guilty. "Emily. She's said things about other boyfriends too," they said, voice low. She likes to make them look small, privately." My stomach dropped. My mind spun in circles, connecting dots I hadn't realized were even there. If this was a pattern, if this public mockery wasn't an isolated incident, what had I actually gotten myself into? I tried to talk to her about it, cautiously, diplomatically, hoping to gauge if it was just me being paranoid. But she laughed, light and airy, like my concerns were cute. "You think I'm bad? Come on, you know me better than that." That laugh. That same laugh that had cut me like a knife in the restaurant. I realized painfully that this wasn't about the ring or the proposal, it was about control, about status, and about me being an easy target. I felt the first real pangs of fear, the kind that makes your chest tighten and your mind churn. How deep did this go? How many times had I missed the signs? And more importantly, how much worse could it get? I couldn't take it anymore. The stone of humiliation and doubt had settled so deep in my chest that I could hardly breathe. That night, I asked Emily to sit down with me, just the two of us, away from her friends, away from anyone who could turn my feelings into a joke. My hands shook as I tried to keep my voice calm, though every fiber of me wanted to scream. "Emily, we need to talk about the proposal," I started, forcing myself to meet her eyes. "The way you mocked the ring. In front of everyone, it hurt. It humiliated me." She tilted her head, that same dismissive smile on her face, like I was a child who didn't understand the world. "Come on," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I was just being honest." "You're being sensitive." I didn't say anything mean. Sensitive. The word hit me like a punch. Honest. Sensitive. She was twisting it all. Gaslighting me in the middle of the room, making me doubt my own perception of reality. I could feel the anger rising, coiling tight in my chest. "This isn't about sensitivity, Emily. This is about respect," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "You humiliated me in front of your friends, and now you're pretending it doesn't matter." She laughed, light and airy, like I was the joke. "You really think I'm cruel? You're overthinking it. People like me, they notice things. I'm just truthful." Her words hit me harder than any insult ever could. I realized in that moment the full scope of what I'd been dealing with. This wasn't a simple mistake. This wasn't even just a personality clash. This was her pattern, her way of being, and I was trapped in the center of it. For the first time, I understood. I couldn't fix this with conversations or apologies. This was bigger than us. Bigger than me hoping for love or validation, and the realization hit me like a wave. If I wanted to protect my dignity, I had to take control. But how? I had no idea yet. After that night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her laughing at the ring, at me, at everything I'd worked for. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was this cold, burning clarity that I had to take control of the situation before it broke me completely. I realized that if I let her continue, if I stayed silent or tried to play nice, I'd be trapped in a cycle of humiliation for the rest of our lives. Something had to change, and it had to change on my terms. I spent the next few days quietly planning, going over every possible outcome. I thought about confronting her publicly, about making her face the embarrassment she'd put me through, but I knew that would feed her attention-seeking side. I wanted a response that was sharp, meaningful, and left no room for her manipulations to survive. I went back over all the moments she'd belittled me, small jokes, subtle digs, the way she'd twisted honesty into mockery. I started writing everything down, documenting her behavior, remembering dates, words, reactions, everything. Work became my camouflage. I stayed late claiming deadlines, but really I was thinking, strategizing, building the mental strength I'd need. Every moment of anger and shame transformed into a kind of energy, not destructive, but precise, focused. I imagined the look on her face when she realized that I wasn't the person she could humiliate anymore. I imagined reclaiming my dignity, taking back the power she had been abusing for so long. And yet, there was fear. What if this backfired? What if I misjudged her, and the humiliation came back to me tenfold? My chest tightened every time I thought about telling her, cutting ties, or taking the ring back. But beneath that fear, beneath the hesitation, was this unshakable certainty. I could not let her define my worth. I couldn't allow her public mockery, her friends' laughter, her manipulation, to leave a permanent mark on me. I didn't know exactly how it would happen yet. But one thing was clear: I was done being humiliated. And soon, she would see just how serious I was. The night of the charity gala should have been exciting. I should have felt proud, walking in with Emily on my arm, showing off the woman I loved. But instead, it felt like walking into a storm I couldn't escape. As soon as we arrived, I noticed the whispers, the sideways glances. Her friends leaned in, laughing quietly, their eyes flicking to me as if I were the punchline to a private joke I hadn't been let in on. My chest tightened, my stomach twisted. I realized just how alone I was in that room. It got worse when she started commenting in front of everyone. "You really went with that suit? It's cute." "I like it," she said, voice light, teasing. "Cute." Every word landed like a hammer on my confidence, echoing in my ears. People around us laughed softly, pretending to be polite, but I felt their judgment like needles on my skin. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. I caught snippets of her conversation with friends, mockery hidden behind casual tones. "I just love how he thinks this is fancy," one whispered, and she chuckled. I felt like I was being erased, diminished piece by piece, in a room full of people who should have been allies. For the first time, I questioned everything: my judgment, my love, my worth. I wondered if I had been blind this whole time, choosing to ignore the red flags. Convincing myself this was normal. By the time we left, I was exhausted, hollow, trembling with a mixture of shame, anger, and despair. I wanted to confront her, to scream, to cry, to do anything that would release the weight crushing me. But I couldn't. Not yet. I had reached the lowest point I'd ever felt in my life. The kind of despair that makes every decision feel impossible. Every step forward feel terrifying. And in that silence, walking alone to my car while she laughed behind me with her friends, I made a choice. I could let this break me, or I could take control and end this humiliation on my own terms. But the question remained, could I really do it? The next morning, I woke up with a cold clarity I hadn't felt before. The humiliation, the whispers, the laughter. I wasn't going to carry that anymore. Every ounce of anger, every sting from the restaurant, every mocking glance from her friends had crystallized into a single, sharp thought. I had to reclaim my dignity. I didn't want revenge that was messy or petty. I wanted control. I wanted justice. And most importantly, I wanted to walk away without shame. I started small. I gathered the evidence, the messages, the comments she'd made, the way she'd turned friends into accomplices. Every little detail became a brick in the wall of clarity I was building for myself. Then I made the decision. I would take the ring back. Not quietly, not in some corner, but deliberately, so that she and everyone who had laughed at me would see that I was no longer a pawn in her social games. When I called her to meet at the cafe, she came in with that same confident, smug smile, expecting charm, perhaps even apologies. But I walked in with purpose, with a calm she wasn't prepared for. I put the ring on the table in front of her. No words, just the weight of that simple gesture. Her smile faltered for the first time, her eyes widening slightly as the reality hit. The one she thought she could humiliate was no longer compliant. "You wanted honesty?" I said quietly, my voice steady. "Here it is. I can't be mocked, diminished, or humiliated anymore." She opened her mouth, stammered, but no words came. Her friends, who were there as witnesses, started murmuring. Realizing this wasn't a drama or a joke, this was accountability. For the first time in weeks, I felt light. The tension that had gripped me so tightly finally loosened. I wasn't just taking back a ring. I was reclaiming myself, my worth, my voice. And as she sat there, shocked, fumbling for control she no longer had, I knew something had shifted forever. The next step felt inevitable. I couldn't just take back the ring and walk away quietly. This needed to be witnessed, not out of spite, but so the world could see the truth. I sent a group message to her friends, the ones who had laughed at me, the ones who had whispered behind my back. Calm, factual, unembellished. The engagement was off. The ring returned, and Emily's behavior had made it impossible to continue. I hit send and felt a strange mix of relief and adrenaline. Later that evening, Emily arrived at the small gathering we'd arranged, expecting to smile and charm, to control the narrative. Instead, she walked in two stunned faces. Her friends exchanged awkward glances, suddenly aware that her laughter, her whispers, her little smirks were not only visible, but now publicly undeniable. She tried to laugh it off, flailing with the charm she usually wielded so effortlessly, but the energy had shifted. I could see it in the hesitation in her eyes, the slight twitch of her lips, the way she suddenly seemed smaller, caught in the mirror of her own cruelty. I kept my voice calm, even gentle, when I addressed her. Emily, the engagement is over. This isn't negotiable. You humiliated me publicly, and I won't allow it to continue. I'm done. The room was silent except for the soft murmur of people realizing the truth. She opened her mouth to respond, to spin it, to regain some control, but there was no path back. The laughter, the smirks, all the moments she thought were harmless, had been exposed. And for the first time, she was on the defensive, sitting there. Watching her scramble for dominance she no longer had, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Power. Not cruel power, but the power of reclaiming my story, my dignity. The whispers, the judgments, the social games she'd played for months now bounced back to her, leaving her facing the consequences alone. And in that quiet victory, I finally felt a sense of justice that words could never fully capture. After the confrontation, the weeks that followed were quiet, too quiet almost, but it was the kind of silence I needed. I spent hours reflecting on everything, the proposal, the humiliation, the way Emily had twisted honesty into mockery, the laughter of her friends, my own hesitation to confront it sooner. For the first time in months, I wasn't replaying moments in my head with a knot in my stomach. I was analyzing them, understanding them, and most importantly, learning from them. I realized how much I had compromised myself in the name of love, how often I had silenced my doubts, ignored red flags, and convinced myself that love meant sacrifice, that enduring subtle cruelty was a test I had to pass. And now, looking back, I understood that it hadn't been love. It had been manipulation. And the clarity hit me like a wave. I deserved better. I had spent too long letting someone else define my worth. There was also a strange sense of irony in watching her try to recover socially. Her friends, once complicit, now distanced themselves subtly. The whispers followed her. The judgment she had ignored now reflected back on her. I felt no joy in that. No gloating, no schadenfreude. Just validation. Proof that truth eventually reveals itself. Even when people think their masks are flawless, I began to think about the future differently. Not about Emily, not about the engagement, but about myself. I could be selective with my trust now. Cautious, but not paranoid. Stronger, but not hardened. Every lesson she forced on me became a shield. Every moment of humiliation, a reminder that I had survived. That I had reclaimed my dignity. And in that reflection, I felt a deep, quiet empowerment. The ring, the proposal, the ridicule, all of it had been a test of who I really was. I passed, I survived, and now I was free to rebuild my life on my terms, without anyone else controlling my story. By the time a few months had passed, I felt like a new version of myself. The engagement was over. Emily was no longer a presence in my life, and the echoes of humiliation had faded into lessons learned. I focused on myself, my work, my passions, my friends, who had truly supported me through the mess. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my own narrative, not defined by someone else's judgment or cruelty. I even found moments of quiet satisfaction when I heard bits of gossip about Emily. Not because I wanted revenge, but because it confirmed something I already knew. Actions have consequences. Her social mask, the one she relied on to charm and manipulate, had faltered. The friends who had once laughed with her now kept their distance, some whispering apologies, others silently acknowledging the reality. I felt none of the need to gloat. I had already reclaimed what mattered most: my dignity and my peace of mind. More importantly, I started imagining the future differently. I didn't feel pressure to rush into another relationship to prove myself or to fix someone else's behavior. I could take my time, set boundaries, and protect myself emotionally. I had survived the worst of humiliation and manipulation. And that survival gave me a quiet confidence that I had never had before. Sometimes, I catch myself smiling quietly, remembering the moment I placed the ring back on the table. That small, decisive act had symbolized far more than the end of an engagement. It had been the reclaiming of my voice, my self-respect, and my power. And in that empowerment, I realized that freedom, dignity, self-worth are the most precious victories anyone can claim. Walking forward, I feel lighter. I feel stronger. I feel ready. And while Emily is left to confront the consequences of her actions, I'm finally living a life defined by me, unashamed, unafraid, and fully in control of my story.